So yeah, welcome everybody. We wanted to take this opportunity really to make sure that everybody's brought up to speed on the activities that have taken place over the last few years, really. We've had quite a number of changes in the way that you interact with Witness to make it easier to create the model in the first place, to deploy it, make changes as you go. So we just wanted to kind of take a pause and go through all of those different updates, just in case there's anything that slipped through that you might not be aware of, kind of in the bigger updates that have taken place. And there might be some tips and tricks that will help you in your kind of modeling life. Yeah, we'll work through these. Just looking at the key focus of these different releases, where we started by making a change to the interaction with display properties. So replaced the display bar and the draw and the update dialogues for all of the graphical items. Then in 26, we continued that and applied it to the detail dialogues. So all of the interaction with element details became properties based rather than dialogue based. And then in 27, there was a real focus on updating the debugger, although there were some other enhancements around each of those. So we'll go through those in a little bit more detail. Yeah, 25, really all about the display properties and everything associated with them, really. A number of different items there that we can take a look at, starting with the display bar. So what was the draw mode for display objects is now available in the new display item pane. So whenever you select an object, all of the display objects that you can draw for that current selection become available, and you can select one of those to add it to your display without needing to bring up the display bar first. And it's possible to draw those still by individual, so one per instance, and by group, once for all instances. And we have the draw by button that will take one of those two pictures to indicate whether the item that you're going to draw is done individually, so one per instance. So we've got all of the different instances shown, or drawn by group. And we can see that if I take this model that I'll come to use later on, but if I take a machine, then I've got the display items that are available and the draw by individual or draw by group that are shown here. So I can click on an item. Let's draw a text object. As soon as I click on that, then if it's available, I can toggle between drawing by group or drawing individual, and then place that on the screen, and I get the four new text items that I've selected. So in 2 clicks now, we can draw those new items into the display. Linked to that, we have the display properties. So there was the one dialog used to control the draw mechanism and the update. We've actually separated that out so that you draw an item and then you update it. So the display properties pane now replaces that update side of the display bar. So whenever you select an item, all of its display properties become visible. And in addition, we've added the type and the instance number of that item into those properties. So they're grayed out, they're read-only, but if, again, I come back to that model, we can see that I've got the text item and the instance number for that piece of text that I have just displayed. There's some additional items in there as well. So if let me just unlock the display and pick an icon here. We've got as properties things that you can interact with now. The X and Y position that you only really saw if you had the coordinates turned on and then drag the item around the screen. But you can now enter those as property values and control the width and the height, which again, graphically, you could manipulate the width and the height. You can now also enter that as a property. So they were maintained by witness, but they weren't visible to the user. So that gives a bit more interactivity with those items. What we've also enabled is the ability to update multiple display objects at once. So I can select here the name and the icon for the machine, and we can see all of the properties that are common to both. So there's a drop list that appears at the top of the properties pane that by default, with that multiple selection, will tell me that I've got all. That indicates that there are further selections that can be made. And then I can select amongst these items to get access to their properties individually, but it doesn't change the graphical selection. So again, if I come to the machine and add an icon property, we show the all. I can select the name and see all of the properties that are relating to the name, but I've still got both of those objects selected on the display. And then the icon to see the icon properties, or look to select all. Okay, and we show the intersection of all of the common properties for these different items. So I've been able to select a name and an icon, two different object types for the display, and any property that is common to both of those types, then that will be displayed in this list. So we see that we've got the X and the Y, but we don't have width and height that are specific to the icon. If I want to access those, then I either need to select that on its own, or I can come and select the icon and see the width and the height that are there. Okay, so if you've got a group selection, then you can either update lots of things at once, or you can go in and update those individually, but you don't have to change your graphical selection in order to do that. Okay, now in this example, I've got two different icons. So all of the icon properties are available, and there's different values, or in some cases, common values. So we see all of the common properties. The common values are shown. So there's a 0 rotate, there's a grey foreground colour. They're both displayed on the simulation layer. But where there are different values, then we indicate that in the text. And we also put this little triangle to the side of the property. And what that allows us to do, if I click on that triangle for the width, then that pops up the properties dialog that tells me the items that are selected. But now individually, I could come and select each of those. I could make them all the same if I wanted to. The other thing that you can do is select all of that text and overwrite it with the common value that you want. So again, I have the two items selected. If I move to select all objects, then I can put them both at the same X position, and that's now aligned the two of those. They both have the value 20, and so I see that value entered, and I don't have the expansion here but they've got different Y values still. So different values, and I can edit those Y values individually. Okay, and what we see, the power that we see for this kind of behaviour is something like, if I pick the assembly model, I've got 4 paths that I can select. So if I select each one of those, then again, as their paths, I see all of their properties because they're common to each of them. Some of them are different values, but maybe I want to make those paths more prominent. So I can set them all to have a width of 8. And in one edit, I can then go and make that update rather than having to visit each one separately. In this case, there's only 4, but real models, there clearly could be many more instances of those sorts of updates that we want to make. So yeah, we think that will make the model editing a lot easier to do, a lot quicker to get to your goals. Oh, sorry. Okay, so that's the display properties and the new display items. Other display content that we updated. We found that there's lots of functions that you can use in the actions language to deal with display objects and move them, change them in some way. And most of them use the display type and the display instance that we've now made public in the properties. But most of those functions will use those. There were 2 that didn't. So delete display item and set display item color used an internal display ID, which wasn't easy to access. And if you hadn't recorded it at the time that an object was drawn, I think it was either difficult or impossible to retrieve. So what we've done is added contemporaries of those. So we've got delete display and set display color that do the same thing as those functions, but they use the element, the display type, the icon, and the display instance. So that just makes those functions consistent with all of the other display type functions. And if for whatever reason somebody still wants to use those, they're still available. We haven't removed them. But we've also added the get display ID function that will take these parameters and return the display ID that you need to use in them. So it just tries to make that consistent really with how things were. If for some reason that is useful, then we can use this same mechanism in that old way, that old style of interacting. Okay, the next enhancement that we added in version 25 was to highlight the proposed selection of an object. So it's an optional highlighting feature for display items, so that when you move your mouse around the screen and hover over objects, then it will give you a preview of the selection that will be made if you click on that object at the point where the cursor is right now. So that will honour any lock setting that is set, so individual lock, element lock, and so on. And what we think people will find really useful with this is that where you've got icons that, or any display that maybe overlaps or are very close to each other, then using this functionality, you can see exactly what's going to be selected, and that highlight as soon as you click the mouse will be the selection that will be made. So again, if I look at these different machines here, I've got selection highlighting turned on. I can turn it off, but as I turn it on now, we can see those items are highlighting to show the thing that is going to be selected. I've got an unlocked selection mode at the moment, so if I make that the individual lock, then that will show all of the icons, cues, and the new text item. That will show me the thing that's going to be selected, so that I can move by a single pixel, and that might change the selection that I'm going to make. But at least I know that before I click the button. So I can move just a tiny amount, and I know that when I click the button, I'll be picking the thing that I want. Ashley.
Yep, I know you probably can't see the chat. There is a question whether there's any create display to go with the delete display.
So we have, if there's designer elements, then we can create from designer, and you'll inherit the display. But off the top of my head, I don't think we've got a function to create display content. There is always the set info that we could resort to, but yeah, not as a built-in function off the top of my head. No, but I can check that and confirm. Okay, so yeah, just on the final point on the selection highlighting, if I do go back to a real model rather than one just with 4 objects in, then you may find as you navigate, you can see that's flickering quite a lot, and so it is possible to turn that highlighting off on using that toolbar button, and now we're back to the old way of doing things, where you don't see that selection, but at the times when it's necessary, it's really useful. Okay, we've also added a new detail property, so that it makes it easy to toggle your model between your build mode and something you as a modeler are familiar with, and a presentation mode where you might be presenting to board members or people who aren't intricately involved in the build process. So as modelers, we'll call the element something that's relevant for where it sits in the process, or a naming convention that you're following, so that you can find objects, find elements when you need them. But people viewing that model might not make sense of that, and might wonder why it's kind of programmy, and they're more like symbols than real names for things. So we've added a descriptive name to the details of an element, and then you can describe it in a much more presentable way. You can include spaces, punctuation, that's free format text, or you can leave it blank if you don't want something labelled against a particular graphic. Then you don't need to have a label in there. And if I select, and the button we have here, the descriptive name button is shown, then we'll use the same footprint of the name display that we've got. So the element m_lathe.30, I can call that the lathe, or the disp m injection molder, I can call that the injection molder. And by flipping between that, toggling that back and forward, then we can change the way that model appears without having to create more text objects, or move things onto different layers, or change the display. It's a simple toggle that allows that descriptive name to make it a more presentable representation for those sorts of consumers of the models. And then on the model building side, to improve the speed of model building, we've added a quick way to build new portions of a model using Auto Connect. So typically, you'd create an element, probably from a designer element, that gives you basic display and detail. And then you go back and revisit all of those elements, connect them together with the rules to make sure that your process is working as you want it. So we've added Auto Connect that will allow you to select from the designer elements, but by using these arrows and then selecting the object that you want, just in that click, we can create a machine designer element and create the rule that connects those two objects together. And it will automatically select that rule based on one of the predefined rules for how different objects can connect. So machine to machine, machine to conveyor, probably a push rule. A machine connecting to a part will be a pull, but a part connecting to a machine will be a push. So I can illustrate that here. So if I start with my initial object, and there's another toolbar button, so there's auto connect with the 4 arrows there, so that shows that that's enabled. And I also get these 4 arrows which just choose the position relative to the part here. There isn't anything about whether it's an input or an output, or none of the process is controlled using these arrows. That's purely for layout purposes. But if I start with a part and connect to a machine, I'll get a push rule, and I've converted that part to an active part arrival. So if I do that the opposite way around, if I start with a machine and auto connect a part to it, then that will automatically create the pull rule against the machine, but my part that's created remains as a passive part. Okay, so very quickly you can auto connect these items together. So a machine to a buffer to a machine. If I want something from one of the other designer element tabs, then I can select and any valid designer element will cause the palette to appear in here, but I can push to a conveyor from that machine, and finally I'll push to ship. And so now I've got an entire model just by connecting those different items together, and any valid combination will create the relevant rule that's associated with it. Okay, so yeah, another what we see as a time-saving feature. If you want more complex rules, then either you could use the rules by mouse, or you could select the element and go into its input or output rule and build up the kind of the text-based complexity of rules that we know a lot of these models end up being. But if it's a quick start that you want, then very quickly you can auto connect those objects together to get a kind of a first pass at a model. And then the final item that I'll look at in 25 is the ability to export to a previous version. So for most of us, there's probably a currently maintained version. You'll receive an upgrade and you'll install it over the top of the version that you previously had. But for some organizations, there's multiple versions that they keep live across their user base. So one team might be on 25, but they've got another team that is having to stay on 24 for very good reasons. There might be policies about how software is rolled out, and to help to share models between those two kind of teams that are on different versions. We've implemented the ability to rewind a model back through the versions so that an earlier version of Witness can get access to the content of a later version model. So if the functionality that's in use in that later version was always available in the earlier version, then you'll export it and the model will open and will run and be available. But of course, as new versions are released, then new functionality gets added. So if there's any new properties that an element has in a later version, then those are simply removed. They didn't exist in the previous version of the model, and so you'd then be able to open it and be able to use the model in that way. But if there's functions or actions that have been introduced in the new version, then they'll probably be contained somewhere in an action block or a rule block, and that in the previous version would no longer be valid, because there'd be some text in there that the witness compiler would no longer recognize. And so in that case, what we do is comment out that entire block of action or rules, and then record it, the location of that in a log file. And as part of that export process, if that's happened, then the log file will be presented to you. You'll have the choice whether you want to open it there and then or refer to it later. But that will show you all of the places that you'll need to revisit and recode that action so that the later functionality no longer causes any sort of issue and becomes valid again in that previous version. Okay, so just briefly to wrap up then on some of the detail on version 25. The focus was all about the display properties with the new display item and the display properties pane, the ability to have multiple selections, the functions, selection highlighting, and then the descriptive name and auto connect that we've looked at. So so that gets us to the 25 release, which was then extended to details in version 26. So that same process of converting dialogue-based interaction into properties-based interaction was then applied to the detail properties. So we introduced the pane. We'll have a look at the undo and redo that we needed, and then some other updates that we've added as part of that. But really, the entire focus, pretty much, of version 26 was to get detail properties grids working. So we have the detail properties pane, which replaces the main detail dialogues. And again, as soon as I select an item, an element, either in the display or on the tree, then all of its properties are available and visible on that properties pane. So if let me go back to one of the smaller models, take that one and get rid of all of those things that I've been using, and let's create a single machine. I can delete that now. So the initial presentation of the properties, we've looked to follow the kind of the flow that existed on the detailed dialogues. Now, in that case, it was left to right. So there was some general content. Then we had input, duration, and output. So we now have a vertical flow of that activity. So actions on start happen with the cycle time, the labour rule, and then the actions on finish at the end of the cycle. So we look to maintain that flow. And the properties that were immediately available within the general tab, we expand by default. So all of these were available on the general tab of a machine, and then you'd have to select a tab to get to any of these other items, setups and breakdowns, and so on. So we've maintained those groupings as well. So if I look at the breakdowns for the machine, then where it makes sense for multiple properties to be updated together. So if I want to define a breakdown, I need to define all of these properties effectively in one go. So we do have that hosted on a dialogue to give that interaction, because I wouldn't want to define something to have a mode of number of operations, but not to have the number of operations defined against it. So if I OK that, I can validate, and it says, no, you've got to enter that there. So where it makes sense for collections of properties to be edited together, then we've maintained that dialogue grouping of content. Okay, and if I have another machine, then it will remember the sections that I had open when I was editing the previous one, assuming that I'm looking at something to do with breakdowns. You don't have to go in and reselect that and expand it again. And that's also maintained across element types as well. So if I define a conveyor that has breakdowns, then it keeps that open. So as I'm selecting amongst my different elements, maybe I'm focused just on the output, and that's all I'm caring about at the moment. So I just want to go in and edit all of the output rules. So I've collapsed everything down, and where they appeared on the other elements, so input was valid, duration and output weren't there. Sorry, duration wasn't there, but output was. So now I've got output, and we remember the collapse state of those items as you move from one element to another. One piece of functionality that isn't new, but might become more useful now that the properties panes are in use, is this ability to drag panes around and redock them. So if I go back into the witness model, one of the things that I have seen people do is take those properties and actually position that kind of between the tree and the simulation space, so that it's more accessible than being over on the right hand side. And if I turn on the new display item, I've moved the property, the detail and display properties away. That one's still there, so I can choose where I put it, and maybe I'll put that on the bottom of the element tree. But that is something that is remembered for your machine that's stored in the registry. So if you have a preferred way of laying those out, then that is something that you can move these things around and make that suit your workflow. So just wanted to get a little bit of feedback, and so there should be a poll that will pop up shortly. I'd be really interested in knowing whether that default layout, where the tree where it is and the detail pane where it is that something that suits you? Are you happy with it, or do you think it's time that we made a change to that?
Should we change the default pen now?
Okay, so a bit of a mix. That some are perfectly happy with it, but some would like to see some movements. Probably not in this session, but as a follow up, I'll look to get in touch and just get some feedback as to how you'd prefer to see them laid out, if there is a consensus amongst people. We've slowed down on the number of new entries to that. So okay, can we close that one? And then, having presented this change in 25 and 26 to you, I know some of you will have been using it since the day of release. Others of you might not be there yet and might still be needing to use an older version. But can we have the next poll pop up? It's just word cloud entry, just any response, any feelings you've got. How do you feel in general about this change that we've made from the dialogues to the properties panes? Sorry, Bruno. Just so I see you've got something in the chat. So yeah, do you feel it's an improvement? Do you think things have got worse, and you'd really love it if we'd actually still got the dialogues as they were? So just a general kind of sentiment as to whether you think that this has been a positive move for the product or not.
I can speak, or you prefer to?
There should be another poll. So if you want to enter your response in the next poll.
In the next what? Next.
There's a pop-up. If you've got a pop-up in the meeting, that you might still have the results of the previous one. If you click done on that, it should come up with another question that says, "How do you feel about this change?"
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Okay, so yeah, bit of a mix, and I think it's probably picked some keywords out of some responses that I would imagine will be longer. But okay, yeah, a range of answers there. Certainly take the point that it took a while to get used to it, but we'll take we will see although anonymous, we will see the full answers rather than just the little snippets that appear on here. So we'll take that feedback. So thank you for giving that interaction. Okay, so let's move on with the next functionality then. So tied in with the change from dialogues to properties panes, we needed to fully implement undo and redo capability for both detail and display property updates. But we've also included things like creating new elements, deleting elements, so that you're able to work your way back through changes. With the dialogues, it used to be possible to change a number of properties and then hit cancel, and you could revert to the state before you made any of those changes. But the properties are all committed as you make them. So as you commit one particular property, that update is made before you move on to the next one. And so the undo and the redo, the buttons were always there, but we've enhanced their behavior so that we can build up these lists of undo and then redo behavior. But what we can do is either undo the most recent change, or if we've made a series of changes, this list will build and build and build, and then you can go back to a certain point where you want to undo the entire chain of changes, and the witness will step back through all of those and undo them for you. Now you have to pick one and work through the full list. We're not able to pick just a single change, because here, as we can see, we've created a part, we've deleted a part, so I couldn't just do the auto connect part, because it's already been deleted by the time I want to do it. So we have to go through these one by one, and then that can get us back to the state that we were in at this point. These lists do refresh at certain points, so it's not an endless ability to undo. So if you perform a model run, for instance, then in the kind of the preparation to do the run, that will cause that undo list or redo list to be cleared, because there could be dynamic changes through set quantity actions or other changes during execution that we can't keep track of in the same way as we can with the UI changes. But anything in the UI, then we are able to give that much richer undo and redo behavior. So also linked with that, and I think that Bruno has alluded to it in the chat, we needed to do something different for properties than the double click on the element. So if I go into a model, then if I am in a machine and I go to some detail and I want to edit some actions on input, I could type print, and then if I double click on this element, then it will insert the name of that element for me. And you used to be able to do that on the detailed dialogues as well, because a dialogue was in control. But now if I come in here and change something to do with the cycle time, so I get rid of that cycle time and I want to use let's find if I got a variable in here, or a data table entry. As soon as I do the first click of a double click, then that takes the focus over here, and I've lost the focus on the property that I had. So that's the reason that we've needed to make the change, is that in order to recognize a double click, we have to process that first single click, and that defocuses it. So what we have done, instead of the double click in this situation, I can hold the control key down and then do a single click on that value. And what that's done, because the control key is down, we can recognize that when the single click happens, and that's done effectively what the double click used to do on the dialogue. So in the, let me escape out of that. If I go into the actions on input, then I can use either mechanism. If there is a dialogue that is shown, then I can do a control and a single click will insert it. You'll have to, I'm afraid, take my word for it, as you can't see the keys I'm holding down on my keyboard. I can do a double click with the mouse and that will insert it there. So both mechanisms work where they can, and the control left click makes sure that the focus stays where it needs to be in the properties grid. Okay, coinciding with the change in ownership, we've modernised the start page, so we have the kind of the new heritage colours. but we've also updated the styling as well. So we've used more modern controls. So if I wanted to resize the start page, I don't have these controls suddenly disappear off the screen, which they used to in old versions of Witness. And yeah, just a more modern look and feel with some of these tiles, and still all the same behavior of the most recently used list or the ability to get to our support materials. And in line with that kind of rebranding refresh, we've taken the opportunity to update demo models as well. So we've rationalized some of these. So we did a review of the kind of the functionality that was being demonstrated in them, and so the new set now contains that functionality, but in a more streamlined way. But we've adopted the branding. We've taken the opportunity to describe a bit more, excuse me, about what the model overall does, but also what the individual areas and components within the model, what they do and what they're contributing to the demo. And we're also signposting users to other models that might be of interest, given that they've looked at a certain functionality in this demo model. There might be something of interest in one of the related models. So we've got model content with these blue headers, the results or any of the reporting with these green headers, and then a brief overview, kind of the main focus, an introduction, and some of them have got mini exercises in them as well, and then these related models that are shown. So just puts this model in context. Okay, so yeah, very much the focus of 26 was on the detail properties and updates associated with it, and then the rebranding that we did and the modernization of the start page and the demo models. So that takes us on to version 27, where the main focus was very much the user experience of the debugger, but there's a group of other updates that we made alongside that. So it wasn't solely the debugger update, and we can take a look at each of these now. So in response to customer feedback, we wanted to improve the usability of the debugger. So in particular, the sizing of these watch and locals panes to, I think, 4 entries has always been a bone of contention, difficult to use, that you have to scroll up and down them to try and find the item that you're interested in. So these now we can resize and we can reorder the entries that are in them as well. So let me use another one of our demo models for this. So if we take the warehouse stock demo model, then sorry, before I do that, let me just stay in here. So this function is taken from the warehouse stock model. So yeah, let's just describe some of the updated behavior. There's a function parameter. So we've got function code for the put away function here. That takes one parameter, which is the category to be put away. We highlight that in bold in this locals window to indicate that that is a parameter of the function and not one of the dimension variables. So out of sight here, but there'll be a dim II as integer. So these are locally dimension variables, and that's the parameter that's being passed into the function. And a lot of the interaction with the debugger, previously you click a button and if you remember, they used to be down the right hand side with text descriptions, and that would take you away to a sub dialogue. You'd enter something and then come back to the main dialogue. So we've tried to centralize all of that, improve that experience so that it's all contained on this one form, and using the kind of the picture controls rather than the written description of what a button might do. We can click and insert or toggle a breakpoint in the margin, so that is active and allows us to set a breakpoint. And we've also, as well as bringing forward the step in and step over functionality that we used to have, we can now also step out. So if you're familiar with other programming languages and developer environments, in debug mode, that's quite common to be able to step out of a function. We can run to the cursor. So we'll have a look at that in a minute. We can position the cursor on any line and then run to it. And we've also added a stop and detail function, which would stop the current execution, just like if you hit the stop button on the debugger. But whichever action or function that you're currently debugging, when you hit that stop and detail, Witness will automatically navigate you to in edit mode to that block of code. So if you're debugging and you find a change that you need to make, you can hit stop and detail, and that will take you straight there rather than having to select the element, maybe open a multi-cycle machine, the third cycle, the actions and input to get to it. So we're taking clicks out of the ability to navigate to that particular area. So if I look at the model now, let's pick one of this move time pick function, and I'll set the break on entry so that we start to debug, and then I can OK that and start the model running. So that will initialize, read some data in from I think from a spreadsheet, and then so we now get the debugger. Excuse me. So what I can do now, this is interactive, so I can swipe that code and right click on it, and I can add watch. So that will automatically create a watch expression for that. If it's just the element that I'm interested in, if it's just the element, I can swipe that and add a watch for that. So we don't have to click a button, type in the expression that I want and then see it. We can do that, swipe the text, right click, and then it will appear. And I can reorder those, so I can resequence them. I've only got a small number of items in here, but potentially I could have 20 or so watch expressions or local variables, and resize those panes so that they become a lot more relevant to the interaction that you want. Okay, so if I pick this, select this first call to the animate pick function, so you can see that the cursor is present on that line. I can run to cursor, and that will execute all of these statements and set the next statement to execute as the call to that function. So if I step in there, that will take me now into that animate pick function, and I can debug, see whether this is working. Maybe I'm happy with the values. I can again add a watch. I can toggle a breakpoint and run to there, and it will stop in that breakpoint. Everything's fine in this execution, so I want to go back to the function that called it. So I've let me disable that breakpoint. I want to step out of that function. So this first execution I'm happy with, that's completed. And now if I go into that animate pick, I'll step into it for this execution. So I can step in there. I see the behavior, maybe spot something that isn't working quite how I want. And excuse me. So now if I click on that stop and detail function, then I started the execution looking at the move time pick. So I started off debugging move time pick. I'm now in animate pick, and I can do stop and detail. And now I don't have to select the function and then hit the actions button. It's taken me straight into edit mode in that animate pick function. And that will work on any actions block, any breakdown. So maybe it's actions on down of breakdown number 3. It'll take you straight there and you can make the edits that you want to make. So again, taking clicks out of the process for you as a modeler. And similar to that, it's not quite the same, but similar sort of behaviour appears on the use report. So we've changed the link. So it used to highlight the where used, the element name. You can click on that and it would take you to edit the element. But again, if it was a multi-cycle machine and you needed to go down through the cycles and find it, it would tell you that here, but didn't help you with the navigation. So we've now made the navigation hyperlink kind of behavior will now work on the how used. And again, it will take you straight there without having to navigate through the element to get there in the first place. So if I go back, close the edit from here and select the put away function, I can select used. It's used in actions on input cycle 1, and that's taken me straight for each truck to the actions on input cycle 1. So there's the put away. So quick navigation on the use report. We've also changed the way that we report either the set or the used behavior on that use report. So if we have another variable, so my vref variable, I can find that in where's that? A different version of this model, I think. Let me use the VIL instead. Yeah, so that will tell me where it is being used. So it used to say accessed if it was only used and not being set. So we've made the assumption that if it appears on this report, then it's being used. And if it's being set to a new value, then we identify it as being set. So if I go to the initialize actions, then here there's FV ILX number 1. So that's been set to a new value. And if I print it, and rerun that use report, now it tells me it is being set and accessed. But if it's only being accessed, then we don't clutter this report with that text. So if it's blank, it's being used. If it's set, it says so, and if it's both, it says it's both. So that simplifies the behaviour for the content on there. Excuse me. And some other behaviour that we noticed was that there are functions that whose purpose is to set the value of a variable or another element. So for instance, DT sort, if you pass a data table to DT sort, it will change it. If you use rvar set on a real variable, it will set it to a new value. So if the purpose of a function is to make a change to the contents, then we now report that as a set type of use, not an accessed type of use. Because what I could have done, let's take that print out of there. If I wanted here instead of just using the assignment for pallet in Y to 424, I could say I var set of that value is 424 in position 1. So that now is a use of the variable because we're not directly setting it, but the purpose of the ivar set function is to set it. So now if I could remember the name of the VI palette in Y. So if I now pick VI palette in Y and do a use report on it, in initialize actions, it records that as being set. So any of the functions that change, particularly data elements, so data tables, attributes, or variables, if there's a function whose purpose is to change an element, then it will say it's a set, not just that it's being used as a parameter to any sort of general function. Okay, and the other update that we made on the use report is to allow it to be used for actions as well. So if I go to the model assistant, then any of these actions I could use it for. Maybe I'm seeing some print statements that I don't expect to see and I can't remember where I've added them. It'll tell me where print is being used in an actions block. And particularly if you are in kind of testing mode, debugging mode, and you've put a stop in somewhere and can't remember where you've added it, then also you can use, so any of these actions, you can search for their use on that use report. So yeah, there's a lot more flexibility there for some of these things that can take time to try and find out where they're being used. Particularly if it was a while ago that you added them and now you start to see them in use. Okay, so something more back on the kind of the graphical front, we've added in line with kind of general drawing tools. We've added the ability alongside the align to be able to distribute either horizontally or vertically. So if you've got multiple graphical items that are selected, then it will equally space them between, if it's horizontal, between the left and rightmost, vertical, the kind of upper and lowermost. And it also takes into account, excuse me, the current lock mode. So if I've got a model that is unlocked and I select all of these items and then distribute them horizontally, then it treats them all as individual things and distributes them in the way that I've asked. But if I set the individual, sorry, let me just undo that to get regular spacing on those things. Let's move that up, yeah. So if I now select those items and set it to individual lock and now do the distribute, then it will maintain that and it hasn't tried to position the status icon separately to the main icon. It knows its individual lock and so it's applied that spacing as I would want it. Okay, and so it spaces out those blocks. Okay. We've added two data table functions. So the ability to delete one or more rows from a data table. So you only need to pass the data table under a row number if it's just a single row, but you can delete a contiguous block of rows from the start row through to the end row if you pass in both of those parameters. And the DT sort function, you can choose a column to sort on and then choose whether to sort ascending or descending on the contents of that column. So yeah, that gives sort behavior to those data tables. We've added path and track journey logs. So it's kind of a stepping stone to what we see as some enhanced reporting. But for now, we've got the data being logged to external files, so that whenever a part or a labour travels along a path or a pseudo path, then we can log that behaviour. And every time a vehicle travels along a track, we can log that behaviour separately. So we can choose a vehicle log and a path log. So while we can control whether it's just path, just pseudo path, or both, they will both end up in the same file. And what that will produce is a log file of the time of the event, in this case the labour, the path they've travelled along, the items that they are connected to, so the idle position, excuse me, the element that they're connected to, and then any attributes that are associated with them. And if I go into the model here and look at model options, then we can turn them on and off here. We've adopted the same filtering functionality as appears on the Explode report. So if you've got attribute filters that are set, then you can build up those attribute filters, apply them in here. In this case, I don't have any defined, but if there's only certain attributes that I want to log, I can create the attribute filter here, and that's the only data that will get written out. And we've seen examples of that where that data can then be consumed into something like a Power BI report, and heat maps can be produced to show which are the most active areas within a process. So I say we're generating the data. We'd like to be able to take it the next step, and also generate the reports, but we're not there yet, just at the data point for now. We've added, again based on some customer feedback, we've added the functionality for end parts where it's applied to a module that contains either a defined path connecting two objects, so the child elements, or a pseudo path that's connecting them. So module 2 here doesn't have a path, but the rule for machine 1 is to push to the buffer using a path, and so a pseudo path is in place. And if I bring that model up, then I can run that forward to stop it at time 6. So all of these parts are contained within the module, but previously the only ones that were being counted by end parts were those that were in the machine and the buffer. So I've got in some user actions, I am printing the number of parts, and I'm using the module as the argument for the end parts function. I can run those user actions, and it knows there are in fact 7 parts in each. So using end parts against that module is now correctly detecting that if this element is in the module and this element is in the module and there's a pseudo path between them, then we should treat that pseudo path also as being within the module. It's easier when it's a real path because it is either in or out as a child element of the module. But in both those cases, we are now reporting that end parts behavior. Oh, sorry. Yeah. We've also changed the behavior of some of the functions that used to cause runtime errors. So we're returning a value of 0 rather than bringing up a runtime error and stopping the execution. So yeah, if there's an empty table for one of these data table functions, or an invalid state was passed for an element to one of these utilization functions, that was causing an error to stop the model. So it will now return 0 on the assumption that the modeler will be able to handle that, but would prefer the execution of the model to run through and effectively ignore that illegal or invalid combination. And then only a minor update, but again, if you're looking at older versions of models, I could look at, let's take something from, let's not go that way. Let me go through here. And if I go to a really old version, let's say Witness 24, and look at one of the demo models, I can open that version, and then if I look on the model title dialog, then it tells me I know that it's been opened in created in release 24 there, and the build number. So if ever you're trying to get in contact with support and people are asking what version any model was saved in, then that's an easy way of being able to find out what that version number should be. Okay, so I say version 27 was really focused on the debugger, but there was a kind of a miscellaneous set of other updates, all looking to improve the build, edit, or deployment of the models, and to improve that kind of user flow. Which brings us to the up to date with the releases of 25, 26, and 27.